Hi, thank you for joining us on our Facebook segment today, which is entitled Overcoming Barriers to Employment for People on the Autism Spectrum. My name is Lillian Doughty. I'm the Director of the Career Development Department here at Pine Tree Society. And today I'm going to discuss some barriers of people on the spectrum and ways to overcome them. First of all, in order to do this, you must be able to identify that there is an obstacle. Sometimes that can be difficult. Um, you need to know that there's an obstacle before you can seek out assistance to help with the issue to be resolved. But before you can do this, an individual on the autism spectrum must decide on the issue of disclosure or self-disclosure. What it means is just telling someone else about your autism or your specific disability. For some disabilities, they're obvious. People who get around in a wheelchair, it's, for instance, that's an obvious. So immediately, the employer can see outwardly that someone may have a disability. But for people on the autism spectrum and other invisible disabilities, the decision to disclose your diagnosis can be really complicated, but remember it's your choice and how much or how little you feel comfortable to disclose. Many employees with autism fear being judged because the accommodation they need are often related to what we call soft skills on the job site, and they're not always easy to see or understand. Um, I'll talk a little bit more about what soft skills are in a moment, but it's always a good idea to discuss the decision first with someone you know well, or you consider a mentor, a family member, a friend, or maybe someone, a support person that you have, because there's a lot of different pros and cons to whether or not or how much you disclose that you have to weigh in. Ultimately, the decision of whether to disclose your diagnosis is entirely up to you, but in general, a good time to disclose your disability might be at a time when you need to ask your employer or your supervisor at the workplace for an accommodation and a reasonable accommodation. So, what's a reasonable accommodation? It's when there is something in the workplace that's preventing you from completing your job or performing your job well because of your autism. Knowing who the best person to disclose to is important as well. Most workplaces have a human resource department. That's a really good place to start. Many businesses have an employee handbook that will actually spell out. They may have a section about how and who to ask for a job accommodation. And of course, you decide that with your direct supervisor or your manager who needs to know about your autism. Um, Most importantly, about disclosure, it's important for you to know that you have a right to keep your information about your disability private. It's not necessary to have to tell your coworkers or your colleagues about your autism or for your need for an accommodation. Your coworkers or people around you may be aware of your accommodations. For example, if you're taking extra breaks or you have a flexible start time in the day, but they're not entitled to know. Um, and the employer is required by law to keep your autism and your other medical information confidential. Most employees with autism do require some type of a reasonable accommodation in their employment. And some of these accommodations are really easy, often very inexpensive to implement, and some require a thoughtful plan. So, accommodations are often needed not only to get the job, but most importantly, in order for you to keep your job. And sometimes our job tasks and supervisors can change. So it's really important that you have those accommodations in place. For example, visual reminders, simplified job descriptions. Sometimes, if possible, during an interview, you can conduct what we often refer to as an informational interview, where the job seeker says, "Tell me about your job and can I observe what you do," before you're considered as an applicant. Um, when you have the job, identify a natural support, a mentor at work in the workplace, maybe a coworker, maybe your supervisor, who you can go to for simple questions like, is our staff meeting today? I have it on my calendar, just wanted to double check. That kind of a person where you can just check in. We've heard so many things from individuals on the autism spectrum that say we want to be treated like anyone else. Everyone wants to be treated like everyone else. And we, of course, agree. But when you have autism, there are some common barriers that most people face in the workplace. So today, I'm just going to highlight the top 5. The 5 most common kinds of things that we hear as in employment specialists in our job coaching. The top barriers and challenges would be the social skills, the social aspect about working. I'm going to just list the 5 and then I'll get into describing each one of them. So social skills would be the first. Multitasking, I'll talk more. Concentration, organizing and prioritizing, and time management. Everybody is unique. Everybody has unique challenges. But if I were to say, someone were to ask what are the top challenges, I would choose these 5. The social skills, they're the most